especially a lot of Singaporeans who are voting in this election, getting a lot of their, I guess, political ideology from the West. That's always been framed on this paradigm between conservatives and liberals. 10 years ago, whether it's in the US or Europe, people who were younger were much more progressive. And then you see when Trump came and how things have changed in Europe, there is a shift to conservatism. These are things that maybe young people don't quite get, the fact that we're a bit more progressive than they think.
It's actually useful to take reference from what you talked about, the West. 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, what you would call the left was appealing to the young people. And now many in these societies are moving towards hard right, perhaps what you might call populist even. There is a lesson here for us, and that is that many of these societies, and some in Singapore too, put ideology ahead of what works. So if you subscribe to an ideology and then try and push through policies based on that ideology, regardless of whether it works for the society, then there will be a reaction from the middle ground. And what you're seeing in the West today is a reaction from the middle ground. If you get into these sorts of issues, the culture wars, then the middle grounds, they are live and let live. They are prepared to be accepting, they are prepared to be accommodating. But if you push extreme ideology to them, that becomes a problem. And what you're seeing is a reaction to that. For example, the baker who refused to bake a cake for the same-sex couple. A lot of Americans may be prepared to accept, I think are prepared to accept same-sex couples and same-sex marriages, but they don't see why someone who is religiously objecting to that should be forced to bake a cake. And it goes to the courts, and the courts say, no, he has to bake. I think middle ground Americans say that is wrong. It offends common sense. You have same-sex marriage, fine. You want a cake, fine, but find somebody who will bake it. And there will be enough people who will bake it. Why do you make it a principle to go to somebody who is religiously objecting to it and force him to do it? And this whole thing about defund the police, because the police are the source of problems. People in the middle ground get upset when you have these sorts of slogans and these sorts of policies. So most people recognize the police are part of the solution. Maybe there are elements there which need to be better dealt with, but to treat criminals as all byproducts of social injustice and the police as part of the problem doesn't sit well with the middle ground. Now in Singapore, we don't look at it as left, right, progressive, whatever. We look at where the middle ground is. We look at what people want. They want a safe society. In order to have a safe society, we need these things. We explain to them. They accept, we put it in. At the same time, we know that people want to move, with the times. They want more freedoms in specific areas. I'm talking about social mores and social conventions. And the law and the policies need to keep pace with those changes and not always behind, but not too far ahead as well. And you've got to go at the pace that people are comfortable with. And so you look at some of the things I do, they look progressive. You look at some of the things that I do, it looks sort of conservative. But the reality is we are very practical people. We have a vision of where society needs to go, or where we would like the fundamentals of how society ought to be. But that vision comes from the current structure of society and what people want.
And it's unique to our own nuance.
Every country is in some ways unique. We are unique in our own ones, and the question is understanding it and making sure people are comfortable with it. And where the change is not going to be completely comfortable, explaining it to them.